Maine is the 38th most popular island.
Okay, yeah, so it's definitely on there. So, when we're talking about situations, right, that's just a different way of saying word problems, okay, is situations. Because just like we saw when we talked about unit rate, when we put our math in a certain context, the meaning of those questions matters, right? So let's take a look at this first question. Does anyone want to read this out for everyone? Any volunteers? Noah, go for it, sir.
Bowling alley charges $3 to rent a pair of shoes and $2 per game. Find an equation that represents the total amount spent.
Perfect. Thank you, Noah. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever been bowling before. Anybody ever been bowling in here?
I suck at bowling.
Good amount of good amount of people. Okay. So if you've been bowling before, for those of you who don't know, that's okay. When you go bowling, you have to wear a special pair of shoes that the bowling place rents to you so you don't slip and slide all over the floor. So in this bowling alley, they charge $3 to rent a pair of shoes, and then each game that you bowl is $2, right? Pretty easy for us to understand the context of what's going on in this problem, right? Give me a thumbs up if you're with me so far on what's going on in this problem.
They're bowling.
They're going bowling. Perfect.
It's their birthday.
Yeah, we could build a backstory, but we don't need to. So, let's go down to the table here. We're going to have to fill out this table, and we can see that the top of our table, the top row of our table, okay guys, let's stop all the side conversations and focus, please. So we can see the top of our table is still represented by X, just like normal. And X here is the number of games bowled. So we've got 0 games bowled, 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, 4 games, right? The bottom of our table is Y, and that represents the total dollars spent. Okay? So let's think about this real quick. How much would you spend if you've bowled 0 games? Noah? $0. That is a great assumption and a great guess. I would say the same thing. However, it's a little bit different, or we're going to have to tackle this a little bit differently. So the amount of total dollars spent after 0 games is actually going to be 3. Because before you start playing a game, you've got to rent the shoes, right? So this $3 to rent a pair of shoes, go ahead and underline that, and right above it, write initial value. Initial value. That's just fancy talk for our starting point. Right? And if we were to graph a line, where would we usually pick to be our starting point? Well, we would pick the y-intercept, right? Which just so happens to be right here on the table, 0, 3. So if you go ahead and bowl 1 game, how much would you have spent after bowling 1 game? Anyone want to take a guess? Brandon? $5. How did you get 5? Where'd you get 5 from?
It's 2 per game.
$5.
It's 2 per game, right? So at 1 game, why isn't it 2?
Because you have to rent the shoes.
That's right, because we have to keep in mind that we already spent $3 renting the shoes. So sometimes we'll have a situation where our starting point is at 0, 0. We'll see that a lot. But sometimes we have an initial value that has to be identified before we can find anything else. So we can see here that our change in y is going to be plus 2 as we move along here. So what's our next box going to be on the bottom? 7, right? If you bowl 2 games, that's $3 for the shoes, $2 for the first game, $2 for the second game. $7 total, right? What about 3 games? How much is that going to be total?
9.
9, and what about 4 games?
11.
11, that's right.
I'm
So,
gonna go bowling at this alley.
I know, it's a lot cheaper than anything in Sacramento, that's for sure. And our change in x on the top, pretty simple, it's just plus 1, right? That's going to be common, but look out for when it's not. All right, so let's take a look at number 2 down here. We've got to find the blank, or the slope, from the table. Okay? And what's going to go in that blank is the term rate of change. We've mentioned this term before. It's just another word for slope. But because we're dealing with a context or a situation, we're going to call it a rate, just like we did with the unit rate, right? 2 gallons per minute, or whatever it was when we talked about unit rate. So our change in y is positive 2. Our change in x was positive 1, just like we know. So our slope here, or our rate of change, is going to be 2. Thumbs up if you're with me so far, up to this point, rate of change. Good. So now number 3, we're going to identify the initial value, or the y-intercept of this relationship, or from the table. Where is our y-intercept, or our initial value on this table? Olamipo? Total hours spent, exactly. Is it the 3, 5, 7, 9, 11? Which one? We're looking for the 3, right? How do you know that we're going to pick 3, though? That's right. It's right underneath that 0 for an x value. Whenever we see a 0, we look right underneath it for our y-intercept. So that's going to be 3. So our initial value, the money that we have to spend before we even start playing any games, is $3. We found our m, we found our b. Let's write our linear equation in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form. And that's just y equals mx plus b, right? So again, we found that our m was 2, our b was 3. So what's our equation going to look like? Who can write this equation for me? Y equals 2x. Great job, Rowana. Plus what? Plus 3, exactly. Y equals 2x plus 3. Not too different from what we've been doing, right? It's all connected. It's all kind of the same thing. The difference here is we've got to understand what's going on in the problem before we can understand what the numbers for the problem are going to be, if that makes sense. So let's look down at number 5. What would the total cost to bowl 10 games be? Well, there's 2 different ways we could do this. We could either head on up to our table and expand this table out like we did yesterday until we've reached 10 games bowled on the top. That's going to add 6 more spaces, though. That's a lot of work and a lot of writing. I don't want to do that. Let's go ahead and use this equation to figure it out. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our equation, y equals 2x plus 3. And we're going to substitute one of these 2 variables, x or y. We're going to substitute it with 10. Right? Which variable are we going to substitute that 10 to, though? Noah? X? What makes you say x? Just a guess? Well, let's take a look at the table. What does x represent? The number of games bowled, right? So if we've bowled 10 games, this number is going to represent our x. So great job, Noah. Great guess. 10 games is our x value. What does y represent again? Total dollars spent, right? Is that what we're trying to find in this problem? Exactly. So we're asked to find the total cost, meaning that we don't know what y is. It gives us that we've bowled 10 games, and that represents x. We only know that because of our table. That tells us y is dollars and x is games bowled. So we head back down. We're going to plug 10 in for x. It's going to look just like this. I'll zoom in a little bit, sorry. So we plug 10 in for x, and then we go ahead and solve. 2 times 10 gives us 20. Plus 3. And that gives us the total cost of what? Brandon?
If we already know the answer, can we just like put it instead of doing all this, or?
Instead of doing all this?
Yeah.
I would like you to show your work, especially right now because these are notes. So you're going to want to know later on when you go back and look at them exactly what you did. If you just write down the answer in your notes, you're not going to know what's going on, especially because you might forget. But on a test, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like on a test.
Yeah, if it's on a test, at least show a little bit of work, but if you can get through it quickly, that's fine too. You'll be okay. Yeah. 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 23, right? Now keep in mind, we're dealing with a situation here, right? Or a certain context. So is 23 a good enough answer?
No.
No, what else do we need here? Azalea? The dollar sign. That's right. We need our units. You can either write the dollar sign in front or write out the word dollars after it. I don't really care. This is probably more familiar to you. And we find that after bowling 10 games, including the shoe rental, right, it's going to cost a total of $23. Which at a bowling alley here in Sac, that'll be like half of one game for you. $23.
Actually,
Probably. I think so.
well, for like a whole family, maybe, not for one person.
That's true.
Actually, at the alley, they do gotta be like, but it's only like $15 for an hour at like the ping pong.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the only reason my dad goes. He's weird. He was a
I know there's country club lanes up in like Sac, not really in
My dad's
Elk
kinda
Grove.
weird.
But
He goes to the alley just to play ping pong.
that's awesome. I love ping pong. I'm a big fan of ping pong. So, are there any questions about this?
Because he had a.
It's pretty straightforward, right? Okay. Here's what we're gonna do. We got to get our textbooks.